Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erica Sherman, and I'm a member of the Education Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Public Protection Impact of the PT Compact. The PT Compact has direct impact on many regulatory aspects of physical therapy practice, including interstate mobility, protection, access to care, travel, and telehealth. This session focuses on the protection piece and for jurisdictions that are considering joining the compact, as well as those who have joined, but have yet to implement the efficiencies of automation to improve compliance with ELDD participation. The speakers for this session are Kathy Arney, Jenny Lapnawan, Karen McIntyre, and Kathy Miller. Kathy Arney is the current chair of the Physical Therapy Compact Commission. She's also the executive director of the Northern California Board of Physical Therapy Examiners. Jenny Lapnawan is the post-licensure service manager at FSBPT. Part of her role includes managing the day-to-day operations of the PT Compact. Karen McIntyre is the chair of the PT Compact Compliance Committee. She's also a member of the Physical Therapy section of the Ohio OT-PT-AT Board and director of clinical education in the Department of Physical Therapy at Cleveland State University. Kathy Miller was appointed as executive director of the Alabama Board of Physical Therapy in January of 2021. She was instrumental in the passage of HB 110, cleaning up legislation that allowed the board to move forward with the implementation of the PT Compact in Alabama. You can find their bios on the event app. They have valuable information to share, and we encourage your participation. If you wish to ask questions during the Q&A portion, members of our committee will provide you with a microphone. Please abide by the ground rules and the program notebook so more attendees have a chance to ask questions. At the end of the session, you've noticed there's always a QR code to complete your evaluation. We really appreciate your feedback, and now I turn the presentation over to our speakers.
Thank you to our Education Committee for that introduction and already providing the information about the topic for today, which is the public protection impact of the PT Compact. I'm Kathy Arney from North Carolina and the current chair of the Compact Commission. And I think, all of you have been around this weekend and have probably heard the purposes of the Compact many times. We'll just review it again for anyone who is not as familiar. To improve access of physical therapy services for the public by increasing the mobility of eligible licensees between states, and to enhance the exam, licensure, and disciplinary database. And that information is shared amongst the jurisdictions that are participating in the compact for the purposes of public protection decision-making and their daily work. So today, the panel is going to discuss the impact of the compact, and this panel has various roles and participation in the compact, as you've heard through the introduction, and there's a list of our panel presenters again. But impact, I'm going to talk about impact first, and impact became an acronym that was developed by the Compact Commission at their strategic planning meeting in October of 2022. And it stands for Interstate Mobility, Public Protection, Access to Care, Travel, and Telehealth. And so today we're going to focus on a couple of those aspects of impact. All right. There we go. The interstate mobility and access to care piece by reviewing, where licensees are able to purchase privileges to practice and how broadly that's reached across the United States, and the aspects of public protection that the compact has been able to specifically impact. So again, growth, requirements of compliance to be in the PT Compact, and issuing privileges. I see a number of faces in here that I already know are participating in the compact, their state is participating, and they're also issuing privileges. And I see a few faces that I know whose state has joined but aren't quite yet issuing privileges, and then a few others who are not yet participating and maybe considering whether they would want to, or taking that back to their states and doing so. And I think appreciating what the requirements are is one way to help determine whether that may be useful information as in your state as it is for others. who have already joined and are participating. We're going to talk a little bit about the Compact Commission planning and some education and outreach. So growth. Growth is important to be able to sustain ourselves financially and to be able to provide the services and administer the PT Compact throughout the U.S. And I am very pleased to provide you some contrast between 2018, this is the map that you've probably visited the PT Compact website. This is the map that is on that home page. And you can look at the number of states that were participating in 2018. There were 6 states that were actually actively issuing privileges and another 15 that had joined but weren't quite issuing yet. And then you go to today, and that map is really filled in a lot of dark blue. The dark blue is states that are actively issuing and participating with the requirements of the commission. Another 7 that have passed the legislation but are not yet issuing for one reason or another. And then several states who have introduced legislation and they're still active in their legislatures at the moment. One little update that if you attended the general session yesterday, these numbers have shifted a little bit or will around November 6th. DC is expected to start issuing compact privileges. And so the numbers shift to 31 issuing and 6 that are not quite yet issuing compact privileges. Another aspect of growth is in the number of privileges sold, and that kind of makes sense. If you've got more states participating, you've got more people that have the ability to purchase and to move about the country. And so if you look at this graphic representation, you've got on the one end, third quarter of 2018, and then on the far end, the third quarter of 2023. And you can see the growth over time. This sort of corresponds to the number of states participating. But then if you look at the last 7 parts of the graph, starting with 2022 first quarter through the end of 2023, both initial compact privileges purchased increased all the way across the board through the year of 2022 in comparison to the year of 2023, as well as the yellow, which are renewal of those privileges. So it's important. It's one thing if someone purchases a compact privilege, but are they going to maintain that privilege? Is this really an effective way to keep people moving about the country and they're maintaining their home state license, but they're choosing to renew that privilege so they can travel or do consulting or telehealth, and that's just useful data to know and something to actually look further into about why people are purchasing and why they're renewing and what things can the PT Compact offer to facilitate that interstate mobility. So we're going to do a Slido, just like you've been doing the rest of the weekend. You're all familiar, and we'd love it if you'd participate, just so we kind of know who's here and what your status is. So if you'll scan that QR code, take a minute to do that, and then provide the answer to the question, what is your jurisdiction status? Are you a current member of the PT Compact? Are you a member but still not issuing privileges? Are you still considering whether you want to participate in the PT Compact at all or advocate for that in your state? Or do you have legislation pending? And so I'm not exactly sure how many people we have in the room, but so far many people here are already participating, about 60% looks like. Some people are still deciding. And part of the presentation and the importance of it today is to help give you more information about what it takes to participate so that you can further consider that. So thank you for participating in that one. So the requirements, just a brief overview because this is going to be covered later. the FSBPT ID, using that as part of your database so that we're not exposing social security numbers. Every licensee that's taken the exam and is licensed in the US has an FSBPT ID. You're required to share weekly information about your licensees with the ELDD. You may be sharing that information already, you're just required to do it weekly. You need to utilize FBI criminal history records as part of the initial licensure decision-making process. So if you don't have the authority to collect that information yet, you would need to obtain that permission from your regional FBI or the state FBI to do that. And then you're also required to report investigation, disciplinary actions, and any kind of encumbrances that licensees have, so that information can be shared. So hearing the requirements, knowing, a lot of states have already joined, some are not, what are the concerns? What would help you to have more information about what would you like to share with the commission about that? Yes.
Licensing requirements.
Thank you. That's a great point, and we can capture that. I think, if that is one of the issues for your state, then the commission, that model language requires that you accept from everywhere. Great. So good. So we've got only small portion of people participating, but that's because we don't have so many in the room who are not participating yet. But biggest concern is the data sharing. So can I just get a show of hands? Is it that you don't think that you have the ability to share that data? For those that said that's their biggest concern. Is it another reason? Yes. Oh, you think that may be the reason? Okay, all right. Well, there are definitely some resources that the Compact Commission has and FSBPT staff has that can assist in trying to help the states move forward so that they do have the ability to participate doing all these things. Another thing we're going to hear more about is the automation, the automatic programming interface, or the application programming interface that several states are working on using or are starting to use. That is an information exchange between the FSBPT data system and your state's data system. There are protections on both ends. My biggest concern was about security of information. It's not just a free-flowing tunnel. There are gates at each end, and you have the ability to accept it and send it when you need, or same on the FSBPT end. But that's a game changer in participating. So if one of the concerns is, we have a small staff, we can't really administer it, the API is very helpful, and we'll talk more about that a little later in the presentation. So the Compact Commission met in October to develop some plans for moving the Compact Commission forward. And I know you probably aren't going to be able to read this slide, but the primary pillars of the Compact Commission strategic plan are education, organizational effectiveness, and advocacy. And we're still new. Some states are further along in their development, but everybody can, the commission is trying to assist everybody in being able to participate effectively, be able to manage their data effectively, and there are specific goals that go along with each one of those that we don't have time for right now. But if you have more interest in exactly how the Compact Commission is going to do that, please ask. We have committees. We've adopted a pretty similar model to what the FSBPT is doing. We have many volunteers, and thanks to those volunteers, you've heard this over the weekend in the general sessions, that without volunteers, you can't effectively make an organization work. You can't get the messaging out there and help everyone to participate. And so we thank them for that. And they are the basis by which some of these goals are going to become accomplished. So I'd like to turn it over to Jenny Lapnawan, who is the part of the PT Compact Commission staff, and she's going to talk about the ELDD.
Right. Okay, thank you, Kathy. Hello, my name is Jenny Lapnawan. As my introduction, or was mentioned in introduction, I am staff at FSBPT, and I've just very recently started managing the day-to-day operations of the PT Compact, working under Jeff Rosa in the back over there. If any of you guys are state compact administrators, you probably received a Q3 PT Compact compliance report earlier this week from some unknown name. That's me. That was me. If you have any questions about that, you're welcome to talk to with me or Jeff after this session. So I'm going to transition from the PT Compact to take a deeper dive into that acronym you heard all weekend, seen multiple commercials about, the ELDD, the exam licensure and disciplinary database. There's been an underlying theme throughout this entire meeting that data is information and that information is power, and you need that to drive good decisions and to further the mission of public protection. So this graphic here is a schematic of how the ELDD works, and I'll just take you through each piece. So the ELDD is fed information from 3 different entities. The first is from you, the member jurisdictional boards. Information regarding when a new license is issued or when the status of a license changes are fed into the ELDD. The other important piece of information we get from you all is any disciplinary action taken against any of your licensees. The next one is PT Compact information, basically whenever a compact privilege is issued, what the compact privilege number is, and whenever there is a change in the status of that compact privilege. And then finally, the exam portion of the ELDD comes from FSBPT, whether it be scores from the PTE licensing exam or scores from any FSBPT developed law or endurance assessment modules. That's the JAM. Okay, so those 3 entities, entities send that information into the ELDD, and then information is integrated into the database using 3 key elements. You may have heard these 3 pieces be referred to as the pillars of the ELDD in past presentations. So the first is the unique identifier, as Kathy mentioned, specifically the FSBPT ID. So obviously when a licensee gets a license in one state, they get a license number. This can get really cumbersome to track with an increasingly mobile workforce as people move from state to state throughout their career. So the use of the unique number helps us to keep information about one individual just consolidated and complete in one place. So we know that Jane Murphy in Louisiana is also the same Jane Doe who was licensed in Arizona. Okay, so this next element is the sending of weekly licensure files, which I suppose showed with a bit of a concern. So quality data means timely data. We need to be as up to date as possible, or in this case, at least on a weekly basis. You may have seen this graphic at Life this summer, but this graphic represents the most common way information from jurisdictions end up in the ELDD. Some of you in the room are probably familiar with this process. Some of you may even live this life. So, at the jurisdiction level, Susie enters information about the licensees into their state database. Then she has to prep and extract a file. Then with all that information, then you have to upload that file to a secure server. Then FSBPT staff has to go into that server, extract it, import it into their own, in their own data, clean it up before importing it into the ELDD. Garbage in equals garbage out, right? So it takes some time to kind of clean up all of that data to make sure we have a good set of information. And this process is fine for now. It gets the job done. It meets the requirement of the PT Compact. I think almost half of the jurisdictions follow some form of this process. But you can be like you're not, like 9 of your fellow forward-thinking, early adopting jurisdictions that have integrated the API, that application programming interface that Kathy mentioned, into your database. As she mentioned, basically allows it allows FSBPT's database to communicate directly with the state board's database without the need for human intervention. So I know a lot of you have probably been asked to do more with less year after year. So this is one way to leverage technology to be able to achieve that. And in case you weren't aware, FSBPT does do jurisdictional grants to assist member states with any technological enhancements that might help them with participation into the ELDD. Okay, so finally the third and arguably the most important element of the ELDD is reporting of disciplinary action. This is what maybe a little hard to see, but this is what it looks like on the jurisdiction interface when a disciplinary action is reported by a state. So essentially, the state creates a report that has a brief description of the act, the NPDB basis for action code, a disciplinary action classification code, so whatever the punishment was, the date the action was taken, and when the disciplinary became effective. So once that information is entered into the database, a jurisdiction where the individual is either licensed or has a compact privilege or has requested score transfer, gets an email notification fairly soon that a disciplinary action has been filed with X state against this licensee, and you can access the report here as publicly available. So obviously you can see the clear benefit of this particular piece. This prevents sanctioned individuals from moving across state lines to avoid the effects of their disciplinary action. Okay, so once all those inputs are put into the database, what the output that comes out is one comprehensive record for each PT and PTA across 53 jurisdictions that includes the licensure and compact privilege information, as well as any disciplinary history. Ideally, these records are updated in a very timely manner and are automatically shared with the participating jurisdictions. And ultimately, the hope is that the impact of your participation in ELDD is public protection. So let's bring that back to the ELDD part, back to the PT compact. How has it helped with the ELDD? So as Kathy mentioned, joining a PT compact means a jurisdiction has to meet certain requirements, as was indicated in the compact legislation that they passed. They have to agree to meeting the 3 pieces of information that we talked about, of 3 pieces of data sharing, the use of the unique identifier, at least weekly submission of licensure data, and timely reporting of a disciplinary action or what we call adverse action. So let's look at some state participation. Okay, let's look at the state participation regarding each of the 3 required elements, use of the FSBPT ID. We started with 1 lone state in 2018, which is the year when compact privileges first got issued. And then over the course of the next 5 years, that number grew to 28. Of those 28 states, 93% are part of the PT compact, and those states are in blue. When it comes to the sending of licensure files, at least weekly, we started with 4 states in 2016, and over the course of the next 7 years, that number grew to 37 jurisdictions in 2023, and of those 37 states, 89% are part of the PT compact. And then finally, disciplinary action reporting. These states started much earlier, rightfully so. 7 states that started reporting disciplinary action in 2001. And over the next 22 years, that number has grown a lot to 38 jurisdictions. Okay, and of those 38 jurisdictions, 79%, so 30, are part of the PT compact. Okay. All that data shown just in a different way. 1 decade ago, there were no states using FSBPT ID. or sending weekly licensure files, but there were 16 reporting disciplinary action. 5 years later, in 2018, again, compact privilege started getting issued. We had a tiny bump in FSB-PT-ID, a huge jump in sending of weekly licensure files, and a slight increase in disciplinary action reporting. And then fast forward to now, we have 29 jurisdictions using the FSB-PT-ID, 37 with a weekly licensure file, and 38 with disciplinary action reporting. There's great progress, I think, but there's always, room for improvement. And we want to know, how do we make sure that the PT compact jurisdictions are meeting these requirements that help us to make the ELDD as robust as it can be? And with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to the chair of the PT Compact Compliance Committee, Karen McIntyre.
Thanks, Jenny. So we'll start with finding out what comes to mind. What's a word or a feeling, at the risk of asking that, when you hear the term compliance? Rules, alignment, following rules. Ugh, yes, that's what I was expecting to see. Rules. So I'm a rule follower by just the way I grew up. I guess I'm the person that tends to kind of follow the rules. But I do think sometimes the word compliance can have a more negative connotation for it. I don't know, some people think of rules as a negative thing. I think rules can also help to keep, there's a purpose for certain rules. And so hopefully today we're gonna talk through, try to clarify what some of those rules are, and really try to emphasize how the Compliance Committee can actually help you in terms of moving forward and being able to help with public protection. So there's three main areas that the committee looks at, and that's monitoring adherence to the requirements, as you said, following the rules, basically seeing whether that's happening or not. Remediation of any areas of concern or areas of non-compliance, and then making recommendations to the executive board. And again, we're focused on that public protection part of that impact. We want everyone to be able to have this interstate portability, but with safety for our communities in mind. And so we've already kind of covered these metrics, I think. What I want to kind of highlight with these is that the ones that kind of just showed up in red there are the ones that we're really focusing on as a committee. We're wanting to ensure that the goal target has been set for greater than 90% consistency or with those in active member states, okay? And the reason for that is FSB-PT has actually provided, financial support for the PT Compact, which we want to keep going because it helps our member states from not having to pay additional fees as well. So we really want to help each other to get these metrics and where they need to be for public protection, and so that the compact can continue in a very cost effective way. I think the one that seems to generate more questions from the Compliance Committee is the disciplinary actions or concerns related to the flagging as under investigation. So I do want to take one quick second because we haven't really mentioned what the flagging of under investigation means. And the big thing to talk about with that is that I think there's just confusion on that. What it is actually in the rule, it says that member states will flag an individual in the online processing system when a member state determines there's probable cause that a violation has existed. So the language in there of probable cause allows for interpretation of what that means in your jurisdiction. So looking at, and you can talk through that in your state with your legal counsel, with the PT Compact Compliance Committee, and identify when is the appropriate time to flag an individual. In one state, you might do that right away when you get a complaint. That might be what your jurisdiction decides to do. In another state, you might wait until you've been able to look into a little bit, determine whether you think there's something that you can prove, whether that's a legitimate complaint, and then move forward with flagging it at that time. So I think that's one thing to kind of clarify. The other thing is also in terms of what information has to be shared. And just because an individual is flagged doesn't mean you have to turn over all of your materials. The sharing of investigative information happens between the states, it's not managed by the compact itself. And so that allows for each state to kind of have dialogue with that and with their legal counsel to figure out what the appropriate time is. So we can help you have these conversations if that's a concern and figure out when is the appropriate time for you to report. Okay, so monitoring itself is a quarterly process. And as Jenny just mentioned, those of you that are member states received an email report last week for quarter 3. So we're at the start of quarter 4, so you just got the quarter 3 report. And so that's kind of the first step in this quarterly process for the committee is those reports are sent out. You're able to see your metrics, where you fell. And what we're asking at that time is for you to respond to us. Let us know, was there an easy reason for why you weren't able to meet that metric that month? Maybe you had a change in staff that prevented that. So communicate that back to Jenny and Jeff. That's super helpful, and a lot of times that's all that's needed. And you're following the rules by just communicating back and letting us know there was an issue. The next step, though, is that the compact staff will update the committee members at a quarterly meeting. So we meet together on Microsoft Teams and go through. We are able to look at trends across states. And we also get that feedback that the states submitted in advance of that meeting. And so they tell us what are the problems, the challenges you guys are facing. And we're able to kind of look at that data, across the states as well. And then the next step is, okay, so you didn't meet that 90% threshold, and it seems like that's been happening maybe for several quarters. Maybe we need to have a conversation. And so that's when the committee will discuss what next steps do we want to take, what kind of outreach and how can we support you. And what that looks like might look a little different depending on the actual area that we're looking at and how long you've been a member, things like that. So the cyclical process that happens repeats each quarter. So this is just a quick overview of what you could expect. So if you're joining, when you could expect to receive those reports, when the committee is going to be meeting, and then when you might get an email or us to ask to meet with you. So I mentioned there's 3 main functions of the committee. Remediation is the second one, and I don't really love that word. Like it stirs up things similar to compliance in me somewhat, even though I'm a rule follower. Remediation just seems like it's like a negative or punitive process in some ways, although I know it's designed to help people. I like to almost think about it in terms of facilitation. And that's what our goal as a committee is, really not to be punitive. We're here to try to help you and problem solve through what issues that you're facing. And so what this facilitation process involves typically is an outreach meeting. We'll meet on Teams with you, schedule the meeting. Something we found really helpful is to try to identify who's the most important people to have in the room. And so, for example, if you're having problems with weekly data sharing, since that seems to be one of the concerns, having someone from your staff that has to manage that process, participate in that meeting can be really helpful. Or if it's FSBP-TID and it's a technological challenge, getting someone from IT there can be really helpful as well. So we'll talk through the areas. What I really want you to understand in these meetings are we're trying to listen to you and understand what your barriers are. Why are you having trouble? What do you think could help you? So really we try to listen and understand your process. Talk us through what's going on. And by the end of the meeting, our goal is that we have a plan that can support you with moving forward and identify what's available from the compact to assist you. So whether that be staff training that's needed or a seed file of licensure numbers to assist with the FSBP-TID. I see Angela in the back, right, who's helped with a lot of this. And so we are here to support you through that. So our committee, currently we're at 5 members. We did have a member recently have to step back, so due to some other commitments. So the Sunshine States, we are assigned to different states to try to help you. So I wanted to put this up on Sunshine States. We're getting reassigned soon is what I was starting to say. But I wanted you to see our faces. I see Bernadine in the back. So we're here to help you. We're not scary people, even though I'm a rule follower. We really want to listen and be available to you. So check out where your state is. Try to talk with us. I'd love to meet people who I haven't had interactions with while you're here today. Wrapping up a little bit here, what has been the impact of the remediation? And I kind of talked to our committee members a little bit about this for this presentation was what are the key things that we're seeing trends in over time or problems that you guys are facing? One of the themes that we've kind of seen is staffing. obviously, when you have turnover, things can kind of slow down or come to a halt. And so we can help with providing additional training, as I mentioned, when staff changes happen. Technology can be the hardest one sometimes, right? Because you can't make changes overnight. Sometimes you have to wait a little bit until a new software system is introduced in your state, and we understand that. But there's other things that we can do to help with technology. We've already mentioned the grants. That's been, immensely helpful and a pretty easy process from what I've seen in my state. Human errors, we already talked about the API, so I think that's certainly one way to reduce human error. But sometimes just you enter a date for that action in the system, and then you get your report a couple months later and it says you're out of compliance, and you're like, what's going on here? You look at it and you're like, well, I know we turned that in. Well, we entered the wrong date and it was a typo. And so just emailing the committee and letting us know, hey, this is what actually happened, that clarifies it, and you're immediately compliant by just communicating that. And the last thing is structural issues, and I think that's more some of the concerns related to how your board functions. If you're part of a bigger board and I'm not allowed to do this, and so that's where we can really have those conversations and figure out, I think through education, how a lot of the things we think are barriers aren't necessarily. We do make recommendations to the board, and we are fortunate to have Corey Tillman-Wolf, who's invited to our committee meetings, able to join us, and we're able to kind of look at trends. One example of how this actually worked was when the reporting of disciplinary action window used to be 48 hours, I think, and it moved to 14 days, right? So that was actually through some feedback and looking at trends and what boards were actually able to do. And just ending, ask questions, reach out to us, we're friendly faces, but talk to us early and regularly. Steve from the committee said, most of these things are due to fixable misunderstandings and accidental non-compliance. And I just really liked that. I think we're all, diligent people, we're in public protection, and so I think sometimes it can be as easy as just picking up that phone and letting us know. But other states have found checklists to be really helpful as well to kind of keep things moving. And I want you to have time to hear from Kathy Miller about how Alabama moved very quickly to get into the compact.
Thank you, Karen. As I was previously introduced as Kathy, I also am the new person with the compact and the one that's getting on board and came onto the job in January of 2021 with no knowledge of the PT compact. Prepared for the interview. I studied all things, compact related, but I really didn't know what it was. It wasn't concrete for me at that time. So next thing you know, we're in March of 2021, and we have legislation that passed, and I found out that day. And I was really confused at that point because we weren't able to actually issue compact privileges. So from there, I started just inquiring. I bugged Mississippi, Louisiana, the FSBPT. I bugged anybody that would give me the time to learn more information about it. So I then began hearing about grant money. So I was like, okay, what is this all about? And I reached out to FSBPT for additional information and found out it's actually a very easy process. And what I did was, with proper instruction and guidance, I applied for a grant, which involved really just a quick letter. And what that grant did, that initial grant did, was allowed us to create a field within our database that would allow for the creation of that FSBPT number, the unique identifier, which would help us differentiate between Susie Q's. If we have 5 Susie Q's, we'll know which Susie Q is which one. So once we did that, we then continued the process of finding out what do we need to do. So I found out I need something called an ORI number. That was super scary. But with guidance from FSBPT, local law enforcement, and various directors, we got that accomplished in August of 2022, which I was told, great, that was a huge hurdle, in itself. Continuing on, I was aware that we were sending this report and why we were sending a weekly report to FSBPT, and then one day I forgot to do it, and I believe it was Angela that let me know. So just a little background information. We're a very small staff. I'm the only full-time employee. I have 3 part-time retired state employees that between the 3 of them work 45 hours a week on different days. So I learned about the API interface and learned that that would be one less thing that I would have to remember, that the data would automatically be transferred. And also too, this was huge. Previously, I had to go out, have a licensee, we got our profile, we're gathering our information to get them licensed. I'd have to go out and get their score, download their score, and make sure I put it on the right profile. I know that sounds super easy, but when you're doing it all yourself and you're answering the phones and emails and what have you, it can happen. So we got the grant for the API, the scores automatically populate into the profile, into the correct profile nonetheless. So that was great. So all of this has been helpful to us in, eliminating duties, overwhelming duties, and I was then able to take staff and put them in other areas and get other things accomplished. I'm talking to more jurisdictions, reading more, and then I find out that I have to have this separate computer. So I'm thinking, what? Why won't my computer work? Find out that's not allowable. So then I applied for another grant with FSBPT. And at that time, we were approved. We got another computer. It is sitting in my office. We're waiting on the staff to name it. Yes, we name everything. So fast forward, I'm told, okay, well, it's time. We've got to get our language updated so that we can actually issue privileges. Got with our board attorney. He drafted some language. I secured a sponsor in the House, sponsor in the Senate. That required a bunch of follow-up and irritating both of them. Going over there for the session, got that passed on March 7th. And Governor Abbey signed the bill, HB 110, on June 14th of this year, and we are still working towards issuing privileges. While there's a lot to be done, we've had a lot of support from FSBPT. We've got a checklist. We're checking stuff off. It's just really a matter of time, and we will be issuing privileges, and it's really, I would encourage each of you to, if you haven't already done so, if you're considering joining the PT Compact, to contact FSBPT, talk about grant money, talk about all these things that will actually enhance the ELDD and subsequently enhance public protection. Thank you, guys.
So we're going to have a few minutes to answer some questions, and this computer looks like it's going to reboot, so we don't really need the computer for that. So.
Right here in Florida, and we're not members of the whole thing that started this year. We'll wait for more information. But this is a great overview of what happens at the state level. When I'm trying to wrap my head around Joe Bag of Donuts, PT, who is duly licensed in another state in legal practice, and we joined the compact, and he can come practice here. But that same Joe Bag of Donuts PT, if he was to come here for endorsement for license directly here in the state of Florida, he could be denied because we have unequal requirements of what it means to become a PT in this state. Can you please address that?
Sure. I think that when the PT Compact was brought up as an issue by the membership, there was a lot of political pressure out there, both federally and statewide. And, the thinking, I think, politically was, well, if you don't make a change of making mobility more easy for licensees between states and states, we're going to do it for you. And so nobody likes to be told somebody else is going to do that for them. And so the concept, evolved, and it was also a way truly to enhance that public protection. I will have to say, as a board administrator, I have not had one complaint against a PT compact privilege holder. In fact, I've had a PT compact privilege holder come into our state and work somewhere as a traveler, and she's reported, something that was going on in the state to us. I know I'm not directly addressing the issue of the differences, but I think what has had to be thought about in each individual jurisdiction, which obviously you have, is that, how much does a difference in 6 hours of continuing competence requirement make to a licensee and their competence and ethics to practice. I don't know what the differences are that are of most concern. Everybody has to take the exam and demonstrate that knowledge base. Everybody now is utilizing FBI criminal background check results in order to, hone in on at least one measure of ethical performance by that individual, and the states are making their decisions. So Jeff looks like he wants to address that as well.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm assuming you're probably referring to Florida's 5-time lifetime limit on the exam as one of probably the main, I think, a requirement that Florida has that is different than most of the other states. Obviously, all the other eligibility requirements are pretty standard in all 53 member states. It's I think Florida and one other state I think have a requirement that is more restrictive than the 6-time lifetime limit. Yeah, right. And so and obviously I know somebody cannot even endorse into Florida if they've tested more than 5 times. So obviously with the compact, like you are correct. Like if Florida were a member of the compact, that person that could not get licensed in Florida would be able to get a compact privilege. But if they basically said, I want to move to Florida, and Florida were to become their home state, they would have to be licensed in Florida. So if they're not eligible for license in Florida, they can't move to Florida and still take advantage of the compact. And that's part of why when we drafted the language, it was based on you have to be licensed in your home state, which must be an active compact state. And if whatever the requirements to be licensed in that state are, you have to meet those requirements. So that applies also to a individual who is not educated at a CAPT accredited program. They may be able to get licensed in state A, get a compact privilege in state B, even if they could not get licensed in state B because of whatever state B's requirements are for non-CAPT graduates.
Craig Miller from Michigan. And just, I guess, to kind of go along with what Jeff was just saying, and it's in our FSBPT materials as well, that does try and speak to, looking at your scope of practice from state to state versus some of the individual, the 6 hours versus 24 hours of CE, whatever the numbers may be. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also telehealth registries as well that, individuals may not even have to seek that, endorsement, licensure, and through a telehealth registry, they can practice and take care of patients, clients within your state border. So.
Anybody else? Any concerns about compliance? Do you have any questions for Kathy about how quickly she was able to do all of those things towards becoming a state that's issuing? I know I've talked to some of you already about your specific individual concerns. All right. If there aren't any other questions, we want to thank you for being here today, and we appreciate your time. Oh, and then there's the evaluation code. Thanks for completing it.